I did a video, I think it was yesterday, making the point that Biden was not keeping his promise, looked a dead man or dying man in the eye, and basically lied. Well, it seems that Joe Biden may not have lied. It seems that the administration is going to back what Andy Barkin said, basically the IP rights. The administration basically comes out and says that they are pushing for the World Trade Organizations to give a waiver to intellectual property rights on various vaccines. And of course, stocks plummet. Many of the other countries started ramping up to try to figure out what's going to be the legalese around getting that done and getting that accomplished. But this is a good thing. Um, some people are complaining that, oh, you're hurting companies. And it's like, think about what you're saying for the moment. In the other video that I did on this, I made the point of, are you really going to argue that fictitious profits trump life? Now, I know 3 a.m. between a lot of people and their gods, they would say yes, but they would have a hard time making that argument in the light of day. There are a few people that would do it, but most people don't necessarily have the stomach to get out and say, yes, I think my profits should trump that person's life. In this very specific case, it's not even profits as an absolute. We're talking about something specific as vaccines. And some of those vaccines, a large share of the money came from us. So it's a little rich to take this tact that, hey, I don't think it's fair that we release the patents. Something, again, that's not real, that we're putting as this kind of fictitious hedge against people being able to get the actual things that they need. Meaning they have the capability to make it, they just don't. And they just don't because a piece of paper says don't do it. And the world community basically stands around and says, yes, that piece of paper, yeah, that's right there. Can't do it. A piece of paper says it. And when you ask the very basic question, well, what about life? Does life matter? And every last one of these countries will say yes. And yet they take actions every day that said the answer is no. Well, at the very least, in this very specific case, Biden is backing, waiving patent rights right here. This just broke like maybe an hour. U.S. backing waiving patent protections for COVID vaccines, citing global health concerns. Right, and the administration says this is a global health crisis, and the extraordinary circumstances of the COVID-19 pandemic call for extraordinary measures. The administration believes strongly in intellectual property protections, but in the case of ending this pandemic, supports the waiver of those protections for COVID-19 vaccines. The United States Trade Representative Catherine Tai wrote as a statement. She continues, as our vaccine supply for the American people is secure, the administration will continue to ramp up its efforts working with the private sector and all possible partners to expand vaccine manufacturing and distribution. It will also work to increase raw materials needed to produce those vaccines, the statement added. World Trade Organization reportedly urged member nations this week to quickly hash out details of an agreement to temporarily ease the rules protecting intellectual property behind coronavirus vaccines. The waiver proposed by South Africa and India could remove obstacles to ramping up the production of vaccine in those various countries. And yeah, the member nations, they basically need a consensus. All 164 has to agree. Whether or not they would get that, I don't know. Whether or not Biden is being serious about backing this, I don't know. I don't even know whether or not it's drawing up some kind of plan and that's a faux plan. Meaning, I know this is going to fail because I know XYZ is going to block or get in the way of this. So, yes, I could give full throated support to something that I know is not necessarily going to go anywhere. It can even be that. I need to see how this kind of breaks out to see what happens on this front. But I wouldn't necessarily take this on face value. Biden had been getting a lot of pressure in doing this, basically allowing many of those countries. Think about what's happening to India and Brazil for the moment, or for that matter, some of the other countries like Mexico, where these countries were getting slaughtered by this virus. And they have the ability to make the vaccine. They just don't. because of various patents. Now, the thing is also, even if they could make the vaccine, do they have the capability of ramping up their production in a way that would adequately deal with this in a very short period of time? Well, even that's an open question. And so, it may not be as simple as, okay, give these guys a patent and let these guys go off to the races. The thing is, and what's also interesting is mRNA vaccines. The Foreign Policy magazine made the point that if you allow this, China and Russia can get their hands on mRNA technology. They can get rid of heart disease and cancer, and that would adversely affect our medical industry. They honestly made that argument. So right here, this is a huge misstep by the Biden administration that will do nothing to increase vaccine distribution and will endorse China's ability to piggyback on the United States' innovation to further its vaccine diplomacy aims. By vaccine diplomacy, they're just mean these words have gotten so manipulative just in the framing of it. Vaccine diplomacy. Vaccine diplomacy is when you give your vaccine away without restrictions, without ties. Meaning, I don't need to get anything from you. I'm just giving you the vaccine because you need the vaccine. Oh, thank you. You're welcome. I'm China. I'm leaving now. That's what they are talking about. When the United States deal with this, they have strings attached. And so they're considering vaccine diplomacy being giving away vaccine with no strings attached and allowing yourself to ingratiate yourself to the various countries that basically are appreciative that you gave them the vaccine. Whereas the United States, we do it as a business deal. So if Mexico wants our vaccine in order to save a lot of Mexicans that are dying, well, we need to get certain concessions from them, like putting the military to prevent people from coming to our border because it makes Biden look bad and it makes him sit in the White House and cry while he's eating his applesauce. We have strings attached. That's the difference. Now, I mean, they're arguing basically that, look, even in this very specific instance, profits matter more. And to put it and wrap it in a foreign policy thing of like, China is going to better its vaccine diplomacy. How's it going to do that? How's it going to do that? It's going to do that by making a lot of the vaccine and doing what to it? Distributing it. Oh, scandal. Perish the thought that China would try to, make vaccine and expand it and give it out to the rest of the world in the midst of a world pandemic. Perish the goddamn thought. Perish the thought. A solution more in line with the administration's stated objectives of improving U.S. competitiveness and keeping jobs in America would be to produce and export vaccines from the United States. And this is former attorney at the Office of U.S. Trade Representative, Cleet Williams. Cleet Williams. All right, Cleet. The U.S. is only going to have X amount of capability to produce a vaccine. It's not infinite. If you have other countries around the world doing it, you don't necessarily have to ship it to them. That's for one thing. You don't have to expend that energy of getting it on boats, of making it in a particular factory and transporting it from point A to point B. And frankly, it's faster if those countries have the capability to produce the vaccine, but just wasn't making those vaccines just because they didn't necessarily have the layout in order to make them. If the technology is there, they may be able to basically retrofit whatever they need to retrofit in order to make the mRNA vaccine or some of the other vaccines. It just seems to make more sense by putting it abroad. But his point is, look, we can have more jobs at home if we ramp up production, make new facilities and everything else. It's like, but there's a pandemic now. How long is it going to take to do what you were talking about in regards to ramping up production? It is in the United States already ramped up in regards to the production. This is not like World War II where you have, let's say, X amount of months in order to kind of expand and figure out what you need to do in order to do so. And you can pay companies in order to ramp up production and bring in more industry and more. That's not this. Now, other countries around the world have the capability of doing what they need to do. Let them do it. This Again, we have to see the details, but this, if Biden goes through with this, will be a promise kept. It will be a promise kept. Like, share, subscribe.